Welcome to the Marvel Mindset, a podcast from ex-Marvel CEO Peter Cuneo. Listen as Peter shares inside stories of what it took to turn around Marvel. Here's your host, Peter Cuneo.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Peter Cuneo. I'm the host of the Marvel Mindset. This is our series of short episodes that we're releasing every Monday morning, talking about the history of Marvel and, most importantly, how Marvel came out of bankruptcy and 10 years later sold to the Walt Disney Company for $4.5 billion. How did we actually pull that off? I've said before that very often there's a lot of things written and said about the creative side of Marvel, the making of the comic books, the making of motion pictures, but there were so many other things that were important to pull off, that we did pull off, that really made Marvel what it is today. So I think it's going to be fun today. So key strategic decisions that we made. Well, when I first came through the door, it was obvious that one thing we had to do was to really focus on cash. We had been in bankruptcy, which is in effect a big shortage of cash. We'd come out of bankruptcy, but we didn't have a lot of cash in the bank. And we had to put a great emphasis on how we spent our money. And we had to spend it very, very wisely. And so part of our new culture that we wanted to form was watching just about every penny. Now, there is a legend about the early days at Marvel that says that we were so cost conscious that we counted the paper clips that we used every month to see if we were misusing our paperclip file. And that's a story I've heard several times. I can testify to the fact that I'm not aware of any time we actually counted all the paper clips in the office before and after the month. But there's no question that we did do a lot of things that, again, suggested that everyone had to be very careful with spending. I was reminded recently, I had a call from an old friend who remembered the old Marvel office that I first went to when I came to the company. In Manhattan, real estate actually gets ranked as A, B, C, or D space. Needless to say, Marvel was in D space when I first came to the company. And my friend mentioned that he still remembers going into our board room for a meeting with me and some others, and sitting at this long board table. Board tables are typically very long, rectangular tables. They're short on the ends and long on the sides. And our board table had actually cracked down the middle. And rather than buy a new board table, we had duct taped the board table, which was probably 20 feet in length, 5 feet across. The table had broken across, and we had just put duct tape to hold it together. And he couldn't believe that we were okay with something like that, but we were, because we were watching every penny when we came out. So cash, very, very important. And always stayed important, but of course we were able to loosen up a lot as time went on and as we were successful. The next strategic decision that was very important was that we wanted to focus and adopt a licensing model for the company, that everything we would do would largely result in licensing revenue. Why licensing revenue? First, because it applied to what we did. It applied to the kinds of things we would do with our characters. And second, usually the production of licensing revenue is highly profitable. You don't have a lot of expenses, and there can be a great deal of revenue, as there was with Marvel. So what do I mean by licensing? A license is basically a contract from Marvel to a person or an individual to make products using the Marvel characters and or the Marvel name. And those characters can be a wide array. It starts actually with working with major studios, which I'm going to talk about next. Those were license agreements. So we gave Sony a license agreement to make Spider-Man movies. We gave Fox the license agreement to make X-Men movies. We made Hulk movies with Universal. It was a license agreement. And generally, those license agreements with the major motion picture companies allowed them to keep the license for a long period of time, make sequels, as long as they made sequels within a certain period of time, because we didn't want our characters to not be in the public eye very often. We wanted that gap to be very small. But we would do licenses for toys, it's very big, which I'll talk more about as well. It was probably our biggest license agreement we did. But you've all seen Spider-Man, young kids in Spider-Man costumes at Halloween. That was also a very big license. License agreements generally lasted or had a term of about 3 years. Some were shorter, but most were at least 3 years. Some would be much longer. So the license to do a Hulk roller coaster in Florida had to be 7 or 8 years long because the amusement park involved was going to spend a lot of money building that roller coaster and would take a couple of years to get their money back, cover the cost of that roller coaster. So that was the kind of thing that would be a long-term license situation, but most averaged about 3 years. The nice thing about licensing is that, and we had a staff of lawyers who did a great job in negotiating and papering those license agreements. I mean, it wasn't too many years from the time I came to the company that we had hundreds of license agreements. License agreements could be many, many different products. They could be for media forms like motion pictures, video games. They could be for one character or many characters. They could be for the United States only, or they could be for Europe only, or they could be for worldwide. So many, many variables resulting in lots of different licensing agreements. The thing that's very important to note, though, about licensing is you always want to make sure that the product that is resulting from the license, that Spider-Man costume, that toy for the Hulk, that whatever was high quality. So we always required our licensees to submit the products to us first for quality approval, because we had to be very careful that our licensees didn't put out products that were low quality, that would actually hurt our business and our reputation and would hurt the characters. So that was a very important part of the licensing, quality control. But again, licensing where the the models were very good, were very profitable for us. The release of a motion picture was particularly exciting for licensing because those were big events for retailers, for example, to take product around a new movie coming out. We made down the road, not day one, but in several years, we were making $100 million on licensing for movies, amazingly, in profit, in cash, net cash. So very exciting. And you could build a lot of excitement for the products around the release of the movie as well. There's a natural partnership there. Let's pause for a moment. I'll be back right after this. So moving on, of course, maybe the biggest decision we made, strategic decision, was to focus on live action motion pictures to relaunch our characters globally. This was a process that I think I've mentioned before, started before I came to the company. A man named Avi Arad was kind of the godfather of Marvel getting into the motion picture business. Marvel in the 90s had, as a company, stuck its toe in the water, so to speak, with no success really in the motion picture business. But the world had evolved and changed. And Avi and a lot of people he brought into the company were very successful in attracting our characters to big Hollywood studios to make movies. And when I first came to the company, the first month I was there, I think I've mentioned that I went to Toronto where we were filming X-Men 1. That was all new for me, but that was the start. We had Spider-Man with Sony. We had Universal with Hulk. Fox had the X-Men, but also had Fantastic Four, Daredevil, New Line Cinema. We did the Blade movies with. Lionsgate had the Punisher. So we were connected and partnered with, through license agreements, with many, many of the really big Hollywood studios. We had talked about no cash. We had no money of our own to finance a motion picture. So all the financing was done by the studios themselves. We did get a revenue share from some of the activities. So we did get a piece of the box office. We did get a piece of DVDs when DVDs were still around. If the motion pictures were shown on airlines, there was some revenue there. We got a piece of that as well. So we shared in the revenues, although the studios got the bulk of the revenues, obviously, because they put up a lot of money to make these films. And it really wasn't until 2006 that we decided to relaunch Marvel Studios itself. So from the time I arrived in 1999 till 2006, we were partnered with major other studios. And I have to say that they were great partners. We really couldn't complain. They understood our characters very well. Our license deals were very fair. We had many approvals on the movies. We had casting approvals, for example. We had script approvals as well. And luckily, I really didn't get involved in casting or scripts. I read scripts, but I never made any changes because I just didn't feel I was qualified. And after a year or two, when we were having so much success with the films, I really didn't feel I needed to get involved. And we had a great, great team making the films. And credit to the big studios as well, not just to our Marvel team. But that was originally how we started. And then in 2006, we decided to restart, if you will, relaunch Marvel Studios. By then, it's very interesting because I was the vice chairman of the board, and one of my jobs was investor relations. So remember, we were a public New York Stock Exchange company. So I spent a lot of time with investors, a lot of time at investment meetings, talking to a lot of different people, giving speeches. And even when we first came out of bankruptcy, there's a lot of skepticism. The world thought that Marvel was going to go back in bankruptcy. In fact, the first year, the stock when I came was $7. And at one point, it was as low as $2. There was great skepticism on Marvel's future. There was no skepticism in 2006 when we restarted Marvel Studios. No skepticism about Marvel overall at all, but there was a lot of people who doubted that we could have our successful launch of our own studio. I often got the questions, well, what can you do that better than big studios? And I would say, well, we can cast and hire people for the movies just like they do. And our overhead will be a lot less. So our cost to make the movies will be, frankly, a lot less, and so on. But I had a lot of non-believers that I talked to regularly. Of course, that brings us to Iron Man 1, Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., which came out in 2008, 2 years later. And after that, no one needed to be convinced about Marvel running its own studio. We had a great success, and that ushered in a whole new era, if you will, for Marvel. And I've often said, I think when we sold to Disney, half the value that Disney paid for Marvel came from the fact that we had our own studios. Very, very important at the point in time and in the future. And frankly, they were a lot of fun to make as well. And that's when we really began to see the full potential for Marvel on a global basis, to see how big we could really be. Well, thanks very much. I'm Peter Cuneo. This has been episode number 5. I'm glad you're tuning in every Monday. We'll be back on again next Monday, talking about, again, more key decisions that Marvel made at various times in its 10-year run from bankruptcy to selling to the Walt Disney Company. Thanks very much. Look forward to talking to you again. I'm Peter Cuneo.